Seemingly, every trade deadline, there's a reunion of sorts that takes place. For GMs, oftentimes, knowing exactly what they're getting from a player as he's inserted into a different lineup mid-season can be more comforting. Last deadline, for instance, we witnessed a couple familiar faces, Lou Lamoriello heading to Long Island in Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac. This time around, for the deadline, there's an interesting slew of players that have been rumored to be potentially moved to their previous teams. In this video, we're going to go over a handful of players that could be heading back to their former teams and the probability of it happening. And with that, here are 5 players who could be moved to their former teams by the deadline. Now, first off, we did previously talk about the prospect of Kessel landing back in Boston. However, another team that's been recently tied to Kessel in the rumor mill is the Pittsburgh Penguins. Of the fourth period has indicated that Kessel has been recently linked to Boston, Pittsburgh, and Minnesota. Obviously, for those of you who don't know, I'll link the article reference below. Kessel enacted his modified no trade clause on his contract to previously block a trade to Minnesota. Things have been looking up for the team a lot since 2019, but even still, it's something to keep in mind. Other than Boston, Pittsburgh has, according to looked into the possibility of bringing Kessel back. Kessel, who won back-to-back cups with Pittsburgh in 2016 and 17, was a key piece involved in the success for the Steel City. Averaging close to a point per game with 55 points in 59 games played during both playoff runs, Kessel proved that he could show up for the team in the bigger moments. However, despite this, I think we can all remember the comical soap opera moments that took place between Kessel and linemate Evgeny Malkin. After witnessing the spat, it logically would make sense that it wasn't the first time that the two clashed either. Kessel also didn't have the best relationship with head coach Mike Sullivan, which many speculate is the reason that he was ultimately shipped out of Pittsburgh. I made a video going more into this story if you're interested, and I'll also link a source from The Athletic if you'd like to learn more. Anyways, despite the previous chemistry we witnessed with Kessel and Malkin, in my opinion, bringing Kessel in wouldn't be the best idea for the team dynamic. Obviously, there's no loyalty either between Ron Hextall and Kessel, like there would have been with Jim Rutherford. Therefore, it's another factor going against it happening. After hearing multiple reports, including one from Elliot Friedman, that the Capitals made a full-court press push for Marc-Andre Fleury, we can conclude that they will be at least in the market for a goalie this deadline, since the Flower reportedly declined and now forces Brian McClellan to look elsewhere for help in nets. Outside of Martin Jones, there aren't really many netminders available that have significant playoff experience, with one exception being former Cap himself, Braden Holtby. As the Dallas Stars are currently outside of a playoff position, speculation has only been increasing that Jim Nill will pull the trigger this deadline on several pending UFAs. And as most of us know, Holtby is among them, as his one-year, $2 million deal is set to expire this summer. Comparatively speaking, Holtby has been having a bounce-back season compared to his lackluster stint with the Vancouver Canucks. Even though he probably won't be in the Vezina running this season, his numbers are still decent, as he's currently sporting a .912 save percentage and a 2.78 goals against average. Obviously, since he was a fan favorite in Washington, fans are going to be hoping that Holtby makes a return to DC. Even though he did struggle in his last season as a Cap, looking at his playoff statistics as a whole indicates that at least for most of his career, Holtby played better in high-pressure moments. After 96 playoff contests, Holtby has a .926 save percentage and a 2.13 goals against average. Those are even better numbers than the ones that won him the Vezina. Not saying those stats are the be-all end-all, but it's still interesting in my opinion. Acquiring Holtby wouldn't be a huge risk for McClellan, and he might be able to sway Holtby to take a hometown discount if he decides to re-up his contract. The possibility of this move happening is higher in my opinion than most on this list, although I wouldn't say it's a complete lock. Only time will tell if Holtby gets another opportunity to shine for the team that once drafted him. As I'm making this video, Zdeno Chara is set to eclipse a record set by Chris Chelios of the most NHL games played by a defenseman with 1,652 games. But according to NHL insider Pierre LeBrun, that's not the only reason that Chara is in the spotlight around the hockey world. LeBrun indicated that several GMs have already contacted Lamoriello inquiring about Chara's services. Obviously, at age 44, Chara has slowed down a significant amount. However, for contending teams, they'd be looking to acquire him largely based on his intangibles of leadership and playoff experience. Chara could still prove to be useful as a physical presence on a contender's bottom pairing. But the ultimate question here is, will Boston trade for the blue liner for the prospect of one last dance? Even though it would be a heartwarming reunion to witness for countless Boston fans, the primary need for the B currently seems to lie on their top two pairings. As I previously mentioned, due to the fact that he has slowed down quite a bit, it's not likely in my opinion that Don Sweeney will trade for Big Z, due to the GM's needs being elsewhere in the top two pairings and also in the top 6 forward group. Even still, I guess you never know, but logic here says it's not very probable that it happens. When many witnessed Mark Giordano being drafted by Seattle last summer, the presumption was already taking hold that the Flames' longtime captain could be rekindling his relationship with Calgary by the deadline. The former Flames captain left quite the legacy in Calgary and was loved not only by his teammates but also fans as well. His recent return to the Saddle Dome echoed the sentiment earlier this month. However, the market has recently been heating up, reportedly for the defenseman, as Boston, Toronto, and even Florida could all have interest. Giordano does have a 10-team no trade list, therefore he will have a say in where he ends up. With 22 points in 47 games played so far this season, Giordano would be the ideal acquisition for teams looking to add experience, leadership, and a solid puck mover to their lineup. Considering his sizable $6.75 million cap hit, however, GMs might be hesitant to trade for the captain before deadline day if they can't get salary retained. Obviously, from the point of sentiment and familiarity, trading for Giordano would make sense. If the team acquiring him was to get him at 50% salary retained per se, then he could command a second-round pick and maybe another smaller piece. The case to turn back to Giordano, in my opinion, could be based on how disastrous Calgary's bottom pairing has been, consisting of Nikita Zadorov and Eric Branson. If Gio was added back into the mix, into one of the top two pairings, it would ideally allow for Branson not to be in the lineup, therefore helping to strengthen the back end. Even though some may not be for it, I could see the potential of a Giordano return happening in the near future. For most watching this video, you'll probably agree that we've saved the most juiciest part for last, as the biggest piece on the trade market this deadline will likely be 3-time Stanley Cup champ Marc-Andre Fleury. With Chicago underperforming this season, the questions become not if, but when the flower will be dealt to a contender. Among the slew of names he's been tied to are the Edmonton Oilers, Vegas Golden Knights, Colorado Avalanche, Washington Capitals, and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Interestingly, I asked you all who you thought was most likely to land Fleury this deadline, and out of 9.2 thousand votes, 24% said Pittsburgh. Despite playing for a bottom feeder type team, Fleury has still been able to record decent numbers, as he currently has a .912 save percentage and a 2.80 goals against average. Knowing the demand for him on the market, the netminder would likely command a first-round pick based on his Stanley Cup pedigree. As much as Penguins fans, myself included, would love nothing more than to see Fleury back in the Berg this playoffs, the one obstacle standing in the way for Hextall would be the cap situation. Pittsburgh not only has another pressing need to meet up front in the forward group, but also only has an amount currently of around $4 million to work with, knowing that the Penguins already have their starter in Tristan Jarry and will be primarily looking for backup help in the crease, makes a potential reunion look less likely to happen. Even if Chicago did retain some salary on the deal, it would still force Hextall to get creative and to let go of his first-round pick, something that Pittsburgh hasn't had a lot of in the past decade.